use explicit violence in your writings?
It's what I do, is one answer. I write horror fiction. There is a kind of curiosity that we have as human beings about our life processes. One of our last life processes is death. It's a legitimate subject for curiosity. We shouldn't be ashamed that the macabre or the morbid exercises some fascination upon us. I tell it like it is. If it's there in my mind's eye, I put it on the page. And that seems to me to be a legitimate way to write.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us here on Written and Read. That is the Horror Reader and Writers podcast. Today we have an incredible interview from a legend of the horror genre, none other than Ronald Kelly. You're probably familiar with some of his classics, such as Fear and 12 Gauge. He won the Splatterpunk Award last year for the Essential Six stuff, and he has just so many other things that he's done. And we're going to be talking about his autobiography that is available for pre-order now via Death's Head or Stygian Sky, I believe, with that. And it's called Southern Fried and Horrified. And we're also going to be talking about 3 chapbooks he has coming out with Death's Head Press, as well as other projects that have just been announced with D&T. It's an insane show, and it's really, we're going to be getting into the mind of someone who has seen it all, from a peak to the crash and burn to rising back up. So you're definitely going to want to stay tuned for this, but we don't really have any major announcements, just that Carver's not able to make this episode, as we stated in the previous ones. You know, he's going to have to miss a couple upcoming, but no worries. We still love him, and he'll be back in the future. Don't worry about that. But in case you are not familiar with us, I'm just going to introduce myself. My name is Aaron Borogard. I'm a 3-time Splatterpunk Award nominated horror author of such works as The Slob, Beyond Reform, and Modern Hysteria. My newest book is going to be up for pre-order very soon, if not by the time this comes out. It's called The Cuck, and you can find the bundles that are going to be released at abhorror.com. That's abhorror.com, just like my name, and that's where you can find all my merch, signed stuff, and everything else is on Amazon. Daniel?
Hey everybody, Daniel J. Volpe. I'm a 2-time Splatterpunk Award nominated author of Talia and Left You. My newest book, Visceral 2, is out now from Death's Head Press. That is a short story collection that Patrick C. Harrison III and myself put together. Any Splatterpunk fan's going to enjoy that. It's brutal, it's dark, it's funny, it's violent as all hell. So check that out now on Amazon. Or if you'd like signed copies, you can go to my website, danieljvolpehorror.com. There you can find all my books signed and merch, t-shirts, magnets, all sorts of other cool stuff. And if you guys haven't subscribed yet to my newsletter, check that out on social media. It's a Substack, so you can find that probably just by Googling Substack. And my cover release for my next book coming out in August will be Plastic Monsters. That's going to be dropping on my newsletter. So check that out. Roland?
Awesome. Hey everybody, Roland Bercy Jr., author of Unportion, Pre-Thanksgiving's Justice Order, Payback as a Witch, and a couple other stories which I have in collections, one in a Baker's Dozen and then one in Battered and Broken Bodies. I just submitted my next short story, which will be in a collection today. So that's done, finally. And I'm working on another longer novel, probably my longest one. You can find me on Amazon or at my website, www.rolandbercyjr.com. You can also just find me on Facebook. And we won't forget our friend Carver Pike. He's not here tonight, of course, like Aaron said. He has his latest book, The Faces of Beth, with an introduction by Brian Keene, which is amazing. I mean, that's huge. You can find Carver stuff on Amazon, and he's on Facebook. He has his first chapter Freak Show, which is on YouTube, so tune into that. Those are always a lot of fun. And I think that I got everything. Awesome.
All right, well, we're going to pretty much get right into the show because we got a 2-hour beefy interview with Ronald Kelly, with all kinds of shit going on. But I do want to quickly mention, I want to thank everybody for all the love and the messages I got regarding the Slob going over 1,000 reviews on Amazon. And it's just been an insane roller coaster ride since I released that. And I kind of did a post and told a few personal things about my degenerate past and just sort of the ride to get there, and in hopes that it would motivate some people, and it definitely did. I got an outpouring of messages from all different people that took something from it. So I'm glad that everybody that hit me up was able to take stuff from it, and I wish you all the best in your own writing journeys and life journeys just in general. So thank you for everyone for doing that for me. It made it a special thing. So
Congratulations to you, Aaron.
thank you.
That's huge. That's really big. So
Yeah, 1,000 reviews is massive.
I'll take it, man. When's the next one? Nice.
Beg, borrow, and
not to
steal.
mention
Just win.
that your post was actually very heartfelt. I sent you a message or commented on it. So I read the whole thing and I was just like, damn, he just opened up. So that's important because their readers get to see Aaron Borogard for who he is, stripped down, and still love you to death for it. So thank you for being who you are and everything that you do.
Yeah, and that's one of the great things about writing for a living now is I don't have to worry about who the fuck's going to see it. You know what I mean? When you want to open up about things that aren't that big of a deal, to just normal people, but, in the lens of a work environment or an employer, it could be very problematic. But
Yeah.
but thank you for that, man. It was great to get your messages and your comments. And here we go, man. Let's get into it. None other than the incredible legend, Ronald Kelly. Thank you, everyone, for joining us here on Written in Red. That is the Horror Reader and Writers podcast. And are we excited today? We are graced with a horror legend on this show. We are definitely bowing down today to the amazing Ronald Kelly. Thanks a lot for having us.
Thank you.
Coming on.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. I was going to roll off a bunch of things about you, but I think people know probably that some of your more classic work, obviously Fear, and you sort of self-admittedly say that that's really one of the ones that is a staple for you. I think
Yes.
a lot of people very familiar with 12 Gauge as well.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe even more recently, they may be familiar that you won the Splatterpunk Award for the Essential 6 stuff, which was awesome. I think actually all of us were there. We got to see that. So
There's that big blue tick.
Big blue tick, and then of course every signed Ronald Kelly book comes with some amazing original Ronald Kelly art.
Yeah.
So, Ronald, I don't know how you take the time to do that in every single book. Like sometimes I feel like it takes me forever just to write an inscription, and you're drawing like detailed, beautiful images. I have my copy of Bloodkin here as well, and again, that has just just an amazing drawing in it. So I obviously want to talk more about your art background later on as well.
Usually it takes me about 5 minutes to draw one of those, but in a convention, I've got to cut it down to like 2 minutes. but I've got it down where it looks pretty good. I'm not gonna, I kind of apologize to people. I'm sorry. I'm gonna take some time drawing in your book, and they're all for it. They don't care, but.
Yeah, I think Matt Shaw does that too, but usually he draws genitalia, so it's not really as elegant as your stuff.
Maybe I need to practice up on that.
We like you for what you have.
Yeah.
No, but I think my first interaction with you, I don't know, it might have been like a year and a half ago or something. We just kind of messaged very briefly, but I did get a copy of the Halloween store from you, and that's when I noticed that you did those really awesome drawings inside. So. That's a great collection, by the way.
Thank you.
And we're going to talk about that as well as some of your other stuff. But really, let's just get this out right in the open in the beginning. Southern Fried and Horrified. That is pretty much, you'd consider that like an autobiography, I guess, right? Like,
Yeah, it is.
But it's great in the means that it kind of jumps between your life, and sandwiched in between are the grits and bits of writing advice, and then it kind of comes right up to current time, pretty much to right now. So, and I thought I was appreciative that you gave me the advanced reader copy of it, and it was really like an awesome, amazing story, just sort of like a phoenix rising from the ashes kind of story that you went through so much. We're going to get into that. Not everything, there's
Okay.
more than we can get into in that book, really, but that's really what we're here to talk about. And also your chapbooks with Death's Head Press, Somewhere South of Hell. That's a 3-book bundle. That's
3 books
for $25 right now. And what's the one with D&T as well? Dan, did you have that one?
Yeah, it's After the Burn. That's
After
Ronald's.
the Burn,
That's an extreme horror collection, correct?
Yes, it is. It's actually a re-release. We put it out in 2011, I believe. Thunderstorm did a limited hardcover of it, and Bad Moon Books did a very limited run of a paperback, and it went over really well. I mean, it was about the most extreme thing I'd done up until that time, and until Central Six stuff. But that was something that me and Zach McCain, we wanted to do almost like a horror collection art book. I wanted to put out a book that had a lot of his art in it, and he did. There's a story in Afterburn called Flesh Welder, and Zach did the cover for that. That was the first publication when I came back to writing in 2006. I did it was like a little chapbook, had my story Flesh Welder in it, and Zach did this wonderful cover of it, and that's kind of where I got the idea for After the Burn, doing post-apocalyptic horror tales and stuff, and so we shopped it around to some people, but it just seemed like everybody thought it was too expensive to do an extensive collection with a lot of artwork and everything. So we put it on the back burner, and then I got Paul Goblich at Thunderstorm interested in it. He did a limited of it, and we didn't have any artwork in the inside. Zach had the cover. The cover that D&T's doing is Zach's artwork that was on the Thunderstorm edition, but it has a new title font, and so I told Zach, well, I want to put out this new version with D&T, but I'd like you to do a lot of artwork in it, and so he agreed to do 16 half-page illustrations, 2 for each story. There's 2 novellas and 6 short stories in it, and it takes place in a world where, for no reason at all, nuclear bombs have gone off, and the whole planet's just devastated and everything, and all the evil sick people take over, and it kind of focuses from story to story on certain survivors, the heroes of the story and all that. But,
so is it like kind of a perspective piece, almost like each story is different people, but in this same world where everything?
Yeah, it's in the same world. Yeah.
Oh, that's cool. That's awesome.
Is there any? Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Ronald.
I'm actually thinking about doing a novel of After Burn with some of the surviving characters. Like all the heroes, band against all the villains, and it's gonna be a novel. It's not gonna be a short story collection or anything like that. So that's one of the projects I've got, kind of working out in my head right now. But I think that would be really interesting.
So that comes out on, I know we're recording this on May 23rd right now. That comes out to Godless on May 27th. I don't know when this episode will be released, but it should be before the Amazon release. And the Amazon release is going to be on June 10th. So, I mean, it sounds awesome. Are these stories, are they connected in any way to each other? Like, are there overlapping characters? Like, I know they're set in the same world, but do any of the characters go from story to story, or are they all just kind of separate?
No, they're all separate. In the original After the Burn, they're all separate. It's like a little vigilance of this this world where it starts like at the very beginning when all the bombs go off, and it gradually gets worse as you go through the book, and so on in the novel that I'm thinking about doing. A lot of the characters that survived, some of the characters didn't survive in these stories. So the ones who did survive are going to kind of band together, and it's going to be called After the Burn Exodus. So
that's awesome. I think it's interesting timing too, because I don't know, I'm the kind of person like, when the pandemic went down or was going down, it's like I was watching all pandemic movies, for whatever reason. Like, some people steer away from it because of current events, but I tend to get more engaged with it for some reason. And it's like, there were like obviously grumblings of like nuclear stuff a lot recently, so it's like, it's kind of like to parallel what's going on a little bit. Even though you wrote it before, it's kind of relevant again.
Yeah, when I decided to put it out again, here all this Ukraine stuff started, and I thought, it's like, it's just a full circle all over again,
Yeah, so I think we've been on the brink of nuclear war since the 60s, so I don't think there's really a wrong time to put out a nuclear Holocaust book at all, so I think you're all right.
Oh, yeah, no, I didn't mean to insinuate that, but I was just saying, like, I think sometimes when there's stuff in current events, I tend to gravitate toward those specific sort of stories for some reason.
Mm-hmm.
But honestly, like, I was blown away when reading the Southern Fried and Horrified book. That was such a cool thing, and like particularly on this podcast, with what we do with trying to sort of assist people in the early stages of their writing career, or maybe people who are thinking about starting a writing career. That book really shows you why anybody who's starting a writing career now really doesn't have much to complain about. After what you had to go through to achieve your dream, it's just night and day compared to now. Now it's like you could be as resourceful as you want and educated with the technology. You were just just praying, fingers crossed, of course, that the right person was going to say yes at the right time. And
that's how very much. Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know if you'd like to talk about sort of your early career versus like sort of your comeback, because I know you talk about in the book where you take sort of a decade hiatus. So maybe if you want to talk about that a little, I think it's interesting.
Okay. Well, I didn't really get the writing bug really didn't bite me until like my junior year of high school. I originally wanted to be a comic book artist. I did my own comic books at high school. Drew them and wrote them. I actually started writing, collaborating with a guy named Lowell Cunningham. That he wrote the scripts and I drew the comics and all that. And then I kind of gravitated and started doing my own comics and writing. And after that, I got the information that you pretty much had to move up to New York and everything if you wanted to be a comic book artist, because they need you right there on the spot pretty much. And at least back in those days. Nowadays they might not work it that way, but and actually the guy that I collaborated with in high school ended up creating Men in Black. So that was pretty cool. Lowell did.
Yeah, I thought that story was funny when the way you told it in the book. You were like, "Oh, I just went and like plopped down at the theater," and then you're like, "That was his name on the screen," and you're like, "Oh, this is that thing with the guys in the suits that he was talking about." Like,
Yeah, that's a wild part in that book. Like just to be so close to historic movies and comics.
Yeah.
And you said you might have been corresponding with somebody that was actually like pretty famous that gave you that advice, right? But
Yeah.
I know you said like you couldn't be 100% sure of it, but I don't know if you want to share that.
Yeah, when I was like 16 and I was right in the middle of doing the comic book drawing and everything, like a dumb 16-year-old, I sent some stuff to DC, and an art editor wrote me back, and his name was Jack, and so we wrote back and forth, corresponded for a couple of months. He sent me big long letters telling me how to set up stories and panels and how to do dialogue and all that, just a wealth of information and all that. And we kind of, I had a character called the Amphibia Human that he was this guy with a big frog head and a big frog leg and everything. It was my take on the Swamp Thing, Man Thing. But I took it seriously. But when I dig out some of those old comic books, it's pretty comical. But we kind of went back and forth on that idea a little bit, and then all things, like that. It just kind of petered out, and we stopped writing and all that. And so years later, I guess it was just maybe a year or two ago, I came across those old letters, and I looked at the bottom of the first one, and say the other ones had only been signed Jack. And the first letter, I looked down at the bottom, and it said Jack Davis. And the way he wrote his name at the bottom looked really familiar, and so I pulled out some old EC comic reprints, and it looked exactly like Jack Davis, the artist's signature. So I'm kind of for 2 years I thought, well, was this really the guy? I mean, did he actually write me and all that? And so I guess it was about maybe 6 months ago. I texted Brian Keene. He's written for DC and he's written for Marvel, and I thought, well, if anybody knows, maybe he would. So I texted him. I said, could you tell me if Jack Davis, who did Mad Magazine and the old EC comics and everything, did he work at DC? Like in the mid '70s? And it's like 2 seconds later, he texts back and he said, yes, indeed. He said, that's pretty cool. So, in my opinion, if Brian says so, I'm going to own up to it. I think that's what I'm.
That's awesome, too, because I have a huge fondness for EC Comics. And that, of all people, for that to be a correspondence that you might not, you weren't even aware of, kind of. Right. I really enjoyed the story that you were talking about too, when you were saying that your mom found that old stack of EC comics. I don't know if it was in the attic or the basement, but and she would read them to you while you were in her womb, and that might have been where your love of like creatures and monsters came from and stuff, right?
I really think so. Me and my mother kind of almost had a psychic connection. Mama had the gift of second sight. A lot of people don't believe that stuff and all that, but I grew up seeing it. Her predicting people's deaths and stuff like that, and me and her almost had a psychic connection. I mean, when she was anxious, she had a lot of anxiety and depression and stuff, and I did too. And when she passed away, it just it's like a cord was cut, And so I think if she read me that stuff while I was in the womb, I'm gonna say I absorbed quite a bit of it, because ever since I remembered, I mean, I love monsters and really bizarre stuff and everything, and so it was like from the get-go I had that interest.
Yeah, those comics were everything too. I remember, I think I was in my teens when I found like they did another wave of reprints for like our generation too. And I know you said yours were reprints too, right? Just
Yeah.
'cause how old these things were, but man, that was just great storytelling in those books. I know Brian Keene was telling us too that was like a huge inspiration for him too. But yeah, you had some really like interesting stories in the book, and I mean, if you guys like that, like some of the stuff we just talked about, there's a lot more than just what we're talking about in there. But what do you think about, like, as far as your journey? I mean, you had to claw to get that book deal with Zebra finally, right? Which, by sort of the way you describe it in the book, is like you might have viewed it somewhat like almost like a second class sort of press, and some other authors sort of said, like, gave you advice and said, Ron, we think like you're a great writer, and like but I don't know, I look back at like all your Zebra covers and stuff, and I was like, man, this stuff looks like what I would have liked more so than anything in any fancy bookstore, like the I know it wasn't 12 gauge at the time, but it went by a different title, but that cover was awesome. I know the one with the lizard that kind of pissed you off a little bit. Yeah, that's my favorite one. Yeah. But there was a couple that were really cool though. They weren't all great, but there was a couple that were awesome. Like,
I like the cover to Fear. That was a good cover too. And,
the Fear one was awesome.
Hindsight, I like that because Hindsight had a personal connection to me, because it was Hindsight was like based on my mother's life during the Great Depression as a child, and it was based on an actual triple murder in a barn back in the 1930s. So I kind of took those two stories that my grandmother and my mother told me all my life and put them together and wrote Hindsight, and that was the first novel I wrote. And I'll tell you how it was back in the 80s and 90s. Writers, horror writers, they pretty much gravitated toward the little small press magazines. There was like Death Realm and Cemetery Dance and the Horror Show magazines like that, and they cut their teeth on it and kind of learned their voice, kind of got established in these little small press magazines. And then the main objective, I mean, if you were lucky, you would get into some bigger magazines like the Twilight Zone or Nightcry or something like that. But your main objective was to get into mass market publishing. I mean, there wasn't a whole lot of independent presses then. I mean, there was a couple. There was like Dark Harvest, who did hardcovers, and Mark Ziezen did a few hardcovers too. But there wasn't any other publishers who were putting out books at the time, full-length books. So everybody, I had an agent. I had Scott Meredith Literary Agency in New York, and I'd been sending them stuff for years, like westerns. I wanted to be a western writer at one time, and I mean, I'd gone through a lot of different genres before I went back to horror. Horror wasn't the first thing I wanted to write, but when nothing else seemed to work, I thought, well, maybe I should go back to my first love and try that, and it clicked, because I was writing Southern horror and nobody else was writing except maybe Robert McCammon and Joe Lansdale, and so I sent my agent Hindsight, and he shopped around for 2.5 years. I think he went through the alphabet, because he went from A to Z, and I ended up at Zebra. But once you got a book deal, then that was it. I mean, sure, it'd been nice to go on the hardcover, but when you started writing the paperbacks, I mean, that was like steady work, and Zebra, they had this reputation of being like the redhead stepchild of horror publishers, and there was Dale Abyss and all these other putting out the really real snazzy sharp covers and all that, and then Zebra had all the skeletons and stuff. I'm glad I dodged the skeleton bullet, because I came in about 2 years after they stopped doing the skeleton covers. Every now and then I wish they'd done one skeleton cover. That'd been really nice to have one.
Now, was you might not know this or not, but I know there's a classic cover of Jack Ketchum's A Girl Next Door, and it's like a skeleton cheerleader. I don't know if that's Zebra, but I wouldn't be shocked if it was Zebra.
No, I don't think that was Zebra, but I mean, they kind of borrowed. I think they borrowed from the Zebra.
Yeah, that's definitely Zebra-esque cover there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and you said that despite like the big trend at Zebra, which was like possessed doll stories and things like that, right? Like a lot of that stuff, that you kind of bucked that trend and continued with your Southern Fried brand, of horror, and until the eventual collapse, right? Pretty much.
Yeah. I didn't want to be pigeonholed with writing the same kind of book over and over again. It seemed to be, I mean, for those particular writers, it seemed to be their thing, and they were popular for it. Like Ruby Jean Jensen wrote a lot of evil doll, evil child books and stuff like that. Did very well, but just for the fact that I didn't want to get bored, I jumped from like a psychic child to like a pack of hungry Tasmanian devils to werewolves to vampires, and Zebra kind of got aggravated about it, because they couldn't market me like as one particular horror writer, because I wanted to do it all.
Yeah, and so how do you think that, like, looking back at it, and in comparison to today, it's like today pretty much the tools are at everyone's fingertips. There's a lot of small presses, given, some are better than others, I think. Everybody's, but I feel like in our community we have a lot of good small presses with like very good reputation. I mean, you publish with multiple of them, Dan publishes with them. I'm doing some stuff with Death's Head as well. And, I think nowadays it's like, back when you were doing it, like you said, I was ready for the pair of steel toe boots. That's what they were expecting you to do, was strap on the boots after. And you had that teacher that said, "Oh, I'm so sorry, Ronald, you're not going to college. You'll never be a published writer." And so that was something that you were like, "Well, I'm going to buck that trend." And you did, but it's like back then it was just, you really go into the detail of how challenging that was. Like you had to type out all your stuff on typewriter. You had to make, it's just something as simple as that. Like think about writers today complaining about they can't finish a book. You know what I mean? Like you got to hand type a manuscript, and like you make one mistake, it's just a completely different game.
It is.
And
I mean, back then you had no earthly idea that it would be this easy. Now, it was like back when I was a kid. I mean, if you wanted to own a movie, you would have a movie projector, and you have a little movie on a reel about that much, about 15 minutes of it, black and white, no sound. But now you own movies and don't even think anything about it. Now with the writing's so easy. I mean, you get it done and send it off, and can be accepted in a matter of minutes. They sit down and read it, and they want to accept it. I mean, you don't have to wait, 3 months to a year to get a reply like I used to back in the mid '80s.
I thought it was interesting too that when you were talking about like reviews too, like how reviews were back then. We're like, we didn't know if we were good, we didn't know if we sucked, like, and it was kind of it's kind of like infuriating, like I don't, like, because like, yeah, you don't get the bad stuff, but you get like very little praise. Like like you said, you might see like, oh, this person did a write up on me in this magazine, like maybe that was the only thing you saw for like months,
Yeah, sometimes it was like a year later you saw it, That's what gets me about, nowadays, it seems like everybody wants instant gratification, like, they want everybody to like their stuff, immediately, and they want feedback immediately, and I didn't have that at all. I mean, when I was writing for Zebra, it was like, I was like a hermit in a cave somewhere, and you didn't talk to other. I mean, I talked to other writers, but it was like on the phone or through snail mail. You didn't have emails, or you didn't have Skype or Zoom or anything like that, and it was a very isolated, process. I mean, you just you'd write a book and send it off, and then you started another book, and it was like, you didn't know if the first book that you sent off was going to sell good or not. You knew it when the royalty checks came in, but other than that, you didn't know whether it sold well or not.
Well, yeah, that was the thing. Like, you probably had no idea unless your publisher was saying, hey, we sold X amount of copies, in these 3 months. So, hey, it's doing well. But like you said, everything is so instant nowadays. The electronics just make it so practical for us. And I couldn't imagine having to print out, especially if you had to hand type every manuscript you were sending out. I mean, you must have went through stamps like crazy. I mean, you probably spent a lot of money in stamps.
Yeah, reams of paper. I mean, it was like, you didn't have the internet to be pulling up research and stuff like that. You either went to the library, or, I had my big old Encyclopedia Britannicas that I relied on, and you just didn't. It was a whole different process, a whole different world. Right now, I mean, I can just Google something and I have the information in a second, and I've found that that's very liberating to have that kind of advantage right now. But especially, writing Deadeye, because, I'm jumping back and forth to, Western history and doing research as I go. I mean, I've written Westerns for years. I wrote like 2 for the Jake Logan series back in the 90s, and I wrote a standalone Western called Timber Gray, but this is the first horror Western, and it's got a lot of, Deadeye's got a lot of cosmic horror. I didn't think it was going to do that at first, and then I started reading like Haley Piper and Mary Sangiovanni, and got more interested in the cosmic horror type of fiction. And because when I was 14 years old, I read Lovecraft, and he just went right over my head. Yeah, I guess his prose was kind of hard to digest at 14, but.
I could agree with that for sure. I mean, I'm from the Providence area, so it's like he's like God over here, kind of.
Yeah, I'm sure.
But no, I trying to read Edgar Allan Poe. Like, you try to read Edgar Allan Poe, and you're like, I have no idea what the hell's going on. Like, some of it I might understand, but especially as a kid, you're like, I don't know what the hell this is.
Yeah. I really like Ambrose Bierce. Was a lot. He was around the same time as Poe, but he wrote a lot of Civil War oriented horror stories and stuff like that, rural horror stories. And I kind of liked Ambrose Bierce a lot better than, and I read a lot of Manly Wade Wellman when I was a teenager too, which is a lot of Appalachian Mountain rural type horror fiction.
Are all of your the works that you have out so far through publishers? Have you ever self-published anything?
No, fortunately, I've always, when I came back to writing in 2006 after I stopped writing for 10 years. I mean, the first person who called me was Richard Chismar from Cemetery Dance, and he said, "Ron, I'm glad to have you back. What do you want to do?" And so it was like I had an open door. I just stepped through, and we did my first short story collection. And I did Hill Hollow, which Zebra had that on their schedule, and they shut down. And from there, I went from 2 or 3 other publishers who kind of crashed and burned, and then Paul Goblish at Thunderstorm. I got involved with him doing some stuff, and we put all 8 Zebra novels out in hardcover, as a essential Ronald Kelly collection. So from that point on, I've always had a publisher. I can see the advantage of self-publishing now. Used to, I didn't see as much as I do now, because back when it was almost like the vanity press when I was when we were coming up in the 80s and 90s. It was thought of as being kind of a bad move if you published your own work or hired somebody to publish your work, because it was like everybody else was shooting for that brass ring, and to get a legitimate publisher to publish them. But I'm seeing more and more how much success, like you, Aaron, and Carver. Carver does very well self-publishing, and there's a lot of other writers nowadays that's doing really well. So yeah, I can see the advantage of it, and you do have a lot more control. That's one thing I'm fortunate when I have a publisher. They give me a lot of input on my covers. When I worked for Zebra, I had no input on my covers, and suffered for it, every now and then. And plus, Zebra wanted to change my titles. The only title that they kept was Blood Kin, and the other ones had changed the title.
You're like, no. You were like, oh, I made the mistake of giving them Father's Little Helper, right? Because like you use that as like one of the parts in the book, right?
Yeah, it was like,
you're like, damn it, I can't blame him. Like,
I always wrote part 1, part 2, part 3, and of that book, part 1 was Father's Little Helper, and they thought, oh, hey, wait, let's use that as the title. And I called them up in New York. I actually called them in New York and pleaded my case. I didn't want to. I thought that sounds too much like a children's book or something like that. But they thought it was snappy, But
what was the reasoning behind changing any of the titles? I mean, you're the author. They wouldn't go through and change the story. So why would they change the title?
In mass market publishing and I guess Big Five publishing back then, it was all decided on committee. They'd have a big board meeting and decide how best to market your book and all that. And if your quirky little title didn't work for them, they'd change it to some generic title that they thought the readers, your readership would gravitate to. Like I did a Civil War ghost story called Burnt Magnolia, and they titled it The Possession. And how many other books and movies have been called that? It's the same thing with Fear. I mean, Fear was Fear County, when it was originally written, and they just chose Fear. And Lord, there's been at least 12 books before Fear was published, and 12 books since Fear was published called Fear, and a movie too, So, but the thing is, everybody, Fear is so identified with that title that I didn't. When I decided to start doing reprinting my books and everything, I kept Fear as the title because everybody knows it as Fear, and I'm just gonna keep it that way.
Now I have a question about Fear. I have a amazing copy here. Obviously, Now, this was from Sinister Grin, who I believe has since closed their doors, correct?
They have, yeah.
Have you reached out to anybody about getting this republished? Or is that something you don't want to talk about? Is that...
No, we've got something in the works right now for Fear, and one of Paul Goblich is going to do something very special with Fear for Limited, and I've got a publisher that's going to do a new paperback of it, and so Fear's not dead; it's just in limbo right now. And
thank God for that.
Yeah. You can't get it in paperback right now. You can get it in ebook and audio book through Crossroad Press. Crossroad Press does about 80% of my backlist books. So I've been working with them for 12 years now, and if you haven't listened to the audio book of Fear, I suggest you do that, because the narrator, J. Rodney Turner, does an excellent job of that. He does the voices. I mean, it's just incredible. You know, it's an experience. It's 14 hours long if you want to invest that 14 hours. But I mean, everybody goes on and on about the audio book, how well it was produced, and it actually was nominated for an audio book award. Laurel Hightower beat me out with the Crossroads, but
was that the one that was nominated for a Grammy?
No, the Grammy was back in 1992. It was an audiobook called Dark Dixie. There was a new age publisher in California started thinking they wanted to get into horror, and they put out some audio books. They did, like Bentley Little did one, and several other writers and me, and I did just it was like a 90-minute audio book with some short stories and all that, and got a really good review in Publishers Weekly, and then my agent said, you know, did you know Dark Dixie's been nominated for a Grammy Award? And I said, why? And it was for best non-musical spoken recording, and you know, they sent me the list of. I mean, it was on the preliminary ballot. It wasn't the one with, you know, at the very end, but it was. I mean, they sent me the list, and there I was right next to Stephen King. I forgot which book his audiobook was up for, but it was cool to see that it was being recognized, you know, in such a big way then. And I was, you know, I think I'd only I've been working for Zebra like 2 years then, and so that was kind of a kick to see it get a little nod like that.
Yeah, and talk. Oh, I'm sorry. No, go ahead, Roland.
I was gonna say, how do you find the narrators for your audiobooks? I just listened to Sick Stuff, and it was really.
Crossroads does that. They handle that. They do the auditions and everything. They send me like little snippets of the auditions and ask me my opinion, you know. And J. Rodney Turner, he started from the very when they did Hell Holla. Way back. I mean, it was like 2013, 2014 or something like that. He did Hell Holla, and then he did Undertaker's Moon and Fear, and he's done several of the short story collections, and I believe he's going to do Deadeye. I hope so. He'll really do a great job on Deadeye. But yeah, Crossroads, they have several. They do a whole lot of audiobooks. They do, you know, they've done them with Brian Keene and Clyde Barker, and I mean, just a whole lot of authors. And when they did Hindsight, they got a female narrator to do that, and that was really nice too, because it really the protagonist in Hindsight is a 9-year-old girl, and she did really well portraying that.
Yeah, those kid voices can be tricky. It's like they're kind of hit or miss, right?
Yeah.
But that's awesome. Yeah, I was listening to. I downloaded another. I had read the Halloween Store a while ago, but I wanted to hear some of your narration, and I downloaded it because I had some extra credits. I don't know who did that one, but that was awesome.
That was J. Rodney Turner did that one.
Oh,
too,
okay.
so.
He was real good. I was.
Yeah,
Found
he's got that deep Southern voice.
Yeah.
When we do our book launch, we're going to do a book launch for Southern Fried and Horrified, and we're going to have it locally here. There's an old train depot that's been restored, and we're having our book launch party, and J. Rodney Turner's going to be there, and he's going to read some stories. He's going to read them like one on the hour, and I've got Jeff Strand's coming in, and Lynn Hansen's going to display some of our art, and Jared Barbie from Death's Head and Stygian Sky, he's going to be there with some cool swag to give away, and so I'm hoping I think we're going to have a big crowd. Carthage, Tennessee might not be able to handle it.
Shut it down.
That's awesome. That's a great idea too, Ron. We got to upgrade like Ron Kelly and get our own people to read for us. So we don't need to be doing readings, like
do fucking block party, shut it down, shoot some guns in the air.
I invited him to come, and he said, "Would you like me to read some of your stuff?" And I said, "Yeah, please do." But
that was so awesome.
I'm looking forward to that. I think that's going to be a good Saturday. I mean, it blew me away when Jared said, "I'm going to fly away from Texas to come to this thing," because I've never had a publisher, have that much respect for me that they'd want to do that, But he also said he loves Lynn and Jeff; they're his favorite people. So maybe he's just coming to see them. I don't know.
We had my table at Scares That Care AuthorCon was next to Lynn and Jeff Strand, and they were some of the nicest people. And Lynn, I just listened to her all day talking to people about her art, and it was just she was just so pleasant to everybody, and it was just awesome to just interact with them. And obviously, she does great work, so her covers are always spectacular.
Yeah. Oh, we'd be remiss too if we didn't give Jeff Strand a shout out for winning that Stoker too.
Oh yeah. It was funny. When I was kind of first promoting this book launch, I did a tweet where I said Graham Stoker winner Jeff Strand, and he hadn't even won it yet. And so I was thinking maybe I had a little psychic, twinge here. We kind of predicted that,
coming back.
But now I can go back and say for sure that he's won one.
He was great to interact with also at Scares That Care, and we got to witness one of his legendary readings, and it was just phenomenal.
The guy's he's hilarious.
Yeah, he's a total package, that guy.
You're going to the AuthorCon next year, right, Ron?
Yeah, I am. I'll be going to Scares That Cares in July as a guest, but AuthorCon, I just grabbed a table in the vendor's room, so I'm going to be, I'll be setting up the Southern Fried Hard table,
Oh, cool! So we'll get to say hi in person then. So that's awesome. Looking forward.
Yeah,
to that.
actually, Joe Ripple called me up and he said, "Is there anybody you'd like to have your table by?" And I gave him your name, Dan. I said, Dan
idea.
And I said, maybe Ruth Ann Jag. I'm a big fan of hers. We message back and forth all the time because we're kind of on the same pages, with stuff, But but it's gonna be fun. I kind of, everybody had such a great time at the last one, and I didn't make it, and I thought, I kind of regretted not going and everything because, when I went to Scares That Cares last year, that was the first convention I'd been to in 13 years. I hadn't done conventions up until then. Now, it looks like next year I might have 3, almost in like a 3-month period, I'll have 3, and they're all up north. So, you know,
You're in Texas, right?
no, I'm in Tennessee. So,
Tennessee. Okay, I'm sorry.
which is,
How dare you, Roland?
No. Don't blame me. Don't come to Texas.
it's a hat. Yes.
The hat's amazing also. Can you just, I know you went over it in the book, but can you just tell us about the hat? Because I know people are probably interested, because that's an amazing hat.
Well, the hat, it's got a history. I kind of related that in my newsletter, the last newsletter I put out. And back in the late 80s and early 90s, when I was known for Southern Fried Horror, they kept wanting, like some author photos and stuff. So I thought, well, why don't I just get me a cool hat and wear it? And I was heavily into taxidermy, so I put a snakeskin band on it, and that became my trademark. I mean, I went to the World Horror Convention, and nobody knew me the first night I went, and the next, because I didn't have my hat on, and the next day I walked in there and everybody knew me, and it was that trademark. And then when the zebra crashed and burnt, and I didn't write again for 10 years, I just put the hat on a shelf, and I got sick of looking at it, because it reminded me of what I'd lost all that, every time I looked at it, and I sold it in yard sale for $20. And so when I came back in 2006, I didn't think about the hat. I was just too busy trying to get established again and everything. And then when Scares to Cares came around, I thought maybe I should, find me another hat. And so, this isn't a regular cowboy hat. This is like a slouch, a gray slouch hat. It's what Union and Confederate officers wore during the Civil War, and this is a gray one. And I went online and found one exactly like it, and I got that. And I went back to the same guy I got the rattlesnake band from, so many years ago, and he sold me this one, and it's like it never went away. It's and I guess I actually thought about wearing a baseball cap, and I just didn't think it'd be right. It seems like every time I do my promotion, I need to wear the hat.
You're like Clark Kent without that thing on. Put that on, you're Superman. Everybody knows who you are.
I'm also half bald, so.
Oh yeah, join the club. I'm only 36. I've looked at this half my life, so you're doing just fine.
Yeah, I think. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Roland.
I'm sorry, keep interrupting you.
No,
How long has your writing career spanned from the time you started to right now?
How long?
Yeah.
It's 36 years I've been writing.
Okay.
It'd be 46 years, say 36 years. Yeah, that's right. 36 years.
Ronald, I'm 36 years old, just so you're aware.
Well, I'm 62 years old, so if I had written those 10 years that I stopped writing, it'd been 46 years I'd been writing. So, but yeah, that's one reason I wrote Southern Fried and Horror. I didn't write it because I thought I was popular enough or famous enough. I'm certainly not famous enough, and I'm certainly not rich enough. Coming out of Stephen King. But I just thought, I have a story to tell. I've been in this genre a long time, and I've been through hell and heaven, and maybe, if I wrote this book, maybe it might help somebody. Maybe they'd see that there's some things in there they can use in their toolbox of writing tools, and I've been thinking about writing it for a while, and then I got on Twitter and I said, would anybody be interested in me doing a memoir writing guide? And Brian King said, please. And so if Brian says he wants it, he's going to get it. So I went, actually Jared was the first one I went to at And I said, would you be interested in it? And he said, yeah, send me some sample chapters. I didn't even have it written, I had a few sample chapters written. And I sent it to Jared, and he said, I want to do it. And so that's how it come about.
And I remember in the book when you talk about selling the hat, and I was like, man, I kind of know what's going to happen because obviously I know the position. You came and won the Splatterpunk Award and all that. But I was like, man, somebody reading this, like that didn't like sort of know where your career would go after that.
Mm-hmm.
That'd be like a real sad moment in the book. Like when you sold the hat, I was kind of bummed out. But
Actually, it was a sad point when it was almost like the final period on the sentence. It was like, well, the hat's gone, so it's never going to come back again. And
yeah.
And then a few years after that, people, I had a friend named Mark Harrison who, he was with me half the way, when I was writing Zebra. He was my best friend and everything, and he kept wanting, trying to get me to get back in the horror again after Zebra crashed, and I'd already, I got married and was working in the factories and having kids, and it just didn't seem like the kind of life that would be conducive to being a writer again. And I didn't really have the desire to write again because I was a little bitter because it all went down. I really feel for the writers who were really invested in Silver Shamrock, because Losing Zebra was a lot like that. I did a little bit better with the Silver Shamrock situation because I've been through it several times before. I've been through it 7 times before Silver Shamrock, actually. And so, yeah, I mean, that's devastating to have a book and it have a home, and then, you lose your publisher all of a sudden, and you're just lost. Fortunately, in today's climate, you've got numerous publishers to go to, that will take your book if and it was so good to see the community come together for these writers, who had lost a publisher, and then practically within a week or two had a new publisher again. So that's something that I really love about writing horror today, is because the community is so so compassionate and so unified. I mean there are factions. We've got cliques and stuff like every other genre does, and but for the most part, everybody's on the same page and everybody's supportive of everybody.
I had a question.
Yeah. Oh, go ahead, Earl.
I'll keep on cutting you guys off. So considering that there's this huge community, and that you have all of this experience that people just want to know about, what's like one piece of advice you would give to somebody who is like just trying to start out and want to get into this, this career of writing?
I'd say just take your time, just work on your craft and get your, get a unique voice, just, don't be, in too big a hurry. It took me 12 years between the time I started writing and the time I actually got a story published. And, that seems like an awful long time, and it was, but, it was worth it, when it finally, that first sale, and then it was like continuous sales after that. But it seems like everybody wants, like I said, instant gratification, instant feedback. And maybe, I mean, I think people depend too much on social media to get their, to get vindicated as far as their writing. It's not like what whether the readers, are drawn. It's like, well, is this fellow writer going to like my stuff, or are they going to tweet about this, or or am I going to get a nod from this writer here? And I see that a lot on Twitter and Facebook, and it's necessary to be out there in social media now. I mean, I'm on Twitter and Facebook and Instagram. Instagram's a good platform because there's a lot of Bookstagram reviewers, and they do these really nice presentations of your book and everything with reviews and everything. And I've sold a lot of books through because of that. And but I'd say for new writers, give yourself some time to learn the craft and develop your own voice, and if you get, I mean, I couldn't tell you how many rejections I had. I mean, I always, when I started out, I wanted to be published in the Horror Show because they were publishing Joe Lansdale and everybody, and I must have sent him 60 or 70 stories and never got one accepted. But I just kept going on with it. I mean, you just had to dig in and keep going. You couldn't give up, and so that's what I'd say to the new writers these days. Just give yourself some time, because the more effort and practice you put into it, it'll pay off eventually.
Yeah, and it's like you eventually, despite all those rejections, you've been published in Cemetery Dance many times, so it's like that persistency, that's something we talk about all the time too, is like persistency and consistency in what you're doing. And I think you're right too, there's a little too much, I think it's a bad decision to come into this looking to get your ego stroked, because the reality is probably the first few books you release, most people aren't going to give a shit, Yeah. But if you can hang in there and you do love doing it, and you continue to just put stuff out just because you love it, you're going to need that love to fuel you, because if you're expecting the people to do it, I mean, don't get me wrong, it happens occasionally, but we're talking like, that's the far minority.
Right.
Of those people that are those overnight sensations. But most people, like, I know me, before I got any kind of readership, it was like, I think I released like 6-7 books, And
well, when I came back to horror in 2006, it was a long road getting to right now, because I mean, people were even, I'd had like almost generation or two of horror readers form before I came back, and they didn't know who I was. A lot of them hadn't read the Zebra books or the anthologies like Shock Rock or Hot Blood, but a lot of people thought I was a has-been, and if you hear a dog barking back there, that's my Jack Russell. Every time he sees a dog on TV, he just goes ballistic. So.
That's awesome.
My shepherd does that too. He spins in front of the TV and barks. And my daughter's discovered the Caesar Milan, the dog whisperer, so it's been a fucking chaos in my living room.
Yeah, I couldn't turn that on. I'd never.
Ronald, I wanted to ask you. You talk about different generations of readers. How do you feel today's readers of horror? Because it seems like the indie horror scene has kind of exploded, and these readers are just voracious. Like, they want a new book every other week, and obviously the advent of Godless, providing a lot of short material. How do you feel like this generation of readers stacks up to prior generations? Are they hungrier, or are they about the same, or what do you think?
I think they're a lot hungrier. I think back then you had a limited amount of things coming out. You had a certain amount of paperbacks coming out in a year's time. I mean, it'd be, if you looked at all the major writers, it was maybe 25 books came out a year, but I mean, right now, I mean, 25 books coming out a week on, if you look at Twitter, everybody promoting their books and everything. But it's good that the readers are hungry because, maybe I'm being just, cynical or anything, but, I've seen where the horror market got oversaturated and that's what made it implode in the mid 1990s. And I wouldn't want to see it happen again, but fortunately, I mean, the majority of the horror being written now is very good quality horror. One reason it imploded in 1996 and even before that is because the mass market publishers were feeding the frenzy so fast that they were taking on books that wasn't very well written or plotted, and writing a 500-page book is that's a big job. I mean, it's not like writing one of these novella-length books that's so popular now. I mean, you got to put multiple subplots into it and multiple characters, and it's hard to juggle all that, and that's one thing I like about writing now is I don't have to put that much effort into it as I used to. I can do a novella or a short novel or a short story collection. I'm basically a short story writer. So, when I put out these little collections, these little Halloween and Christmas collections and stuff like that, that's my meat and potatoes. That's what I like to do, and I will write novels eventually. I mean, it's been a while since I've actually written a full-length novel. I think the Buzzard Zone was the last one I wrote, but I've got several in my head and plan to write. So.
Yeah.
Speaking.
Oh, do you mind if I ask something?
No, I'm sorry.
Come on, Roland. Raise your hand.
Sorry.
No,
I
it's
just
all right.
have a lot of questions.
I know, no. We all want to hog Ron Kelly.
Okay.
No, that's okay. But I just want to tie back to the book too, the Southern Fried and Horrified, which again the limited edition hardcover is still available for pre-order. There's a few left, so you guys probably want to go to Stieg and Sky Media immediately when you're seeing this before they're all gone.
And I went, Jared, I messaged Jared and I said I'd like to do a nice piece of art for the signature page, and he said, well, hell, I'd like you to do art all through the book if you want to. So that might happen. I might be putting some artwork all the way through that limited hardcover. I mean, we've got it all laid out, and there goes Toby again. But we've got it all laid out, the design and everything. But if he wants me to do some extra work, I'll devote some time to do that. So that might be an extra incentive to get that limited edition, to get that arcade artwork in there.
Absolutely, and you did the artwork in Mr. Glowbones too, right?
Mm-hmm.
So for any readers who are a fan of that book, that's the artwork that you would expect to see. But I wanted to say another thing about the Southern Fried and Horrified is, like, I thought how you did the zebra era in the book was really cool. Like, you kind of listed each book and like your mood, kind of like when the book was being released. You were like, oh, I'm indifferent or something for this one, or like, I'm hopeful for this one. Like after you release Fear, like you were a little nervous still, kind of, because you're like, am I going to be able to? Because it was Bloodkin after that, right?
Right. Yeah.
And so you were like, is this going to be able to sort of keep expectations and keep up? So like, if anybody who's interested in, like, getting into an author's head for a period of time where they wrote 6 books and released them, that, I think that's real interesting kind of to look at. So
actually, that was on Facebook. I went on Facebook and did like 8 different posts for each book, and so practically that whole chapter is those Facebook posts strung together. So that's why it's written that way.
Oh,
But,
cool. Okay.
but if
I
you'll
like that though. That's cool.
if
Like,
you'll go back a couple years on my Facebook page, you'll find those posts on there. And so when I got to that point in the book, I thought, I don't think I could tell it any better than I did on those posts. So I went back and found those. So I had to scroll back a long time before I found those posts. And then I just kind of took those posts and informed them into the Zebra Years chapter of the book.
and before we move on, because I know we have other stuff to talk about that you have coming out. I just wanted to say also with this, the part in the book where I don't think we should probably go into it. Maybe that'll be something people read, but there's a real emotional part in the book too when it all comes crashing down, that you go into detail with. That I thought, it really just puts you right there as if you had lost it all. So that's something, that's pretty insane. But I thought what was cool was like the message board stuff too. Like when you started hearing that they were talking about you on the message board, and like they're like, "Hey, I heard Ron Kelly's just working a regular job now," and then like you didn't have a computer or maybe the internet or something at that time, right? And so you were like told your wife, I think you were like, "Hey, print out all the pages of the message board. And then I want to see what they're saying about me." Like, it's just like, you did so much back then, and it, like, I imagine, like, after you just sort of turning it off for a little while, it felt good, to know that people still remembered, and like people were like, "Where's Ron?"
That was what kind of sparked my interest again. It just gave me a kind of an indication that I wasn't completely dead, as far as, because people had read my books and they were inspired by my books. I mean, I hadn't even started writing back again, and my friend I was telling you about brought me some books from a convention, and one was The Rising from Brian Keene, and he had a description saying, "Thanks for all the inspiration and all that," and I thought, something that I wrote actually, inspired somebody to become a horror writer, and that was, and in turn it inspired me to come back.
Pretty good horror writer.
Yeah,
Like,
he
right,
turned out okay.
He's put out a few things.
Yeah, but I just thought that was cool, that how that sort of came together. And so anybody who wants to get all those inside details and so much more about the writing process, you have to get the book, one way or another.
Absolutely. If you're a newer author, especially, I think this is a must that you need to read this, because it's going to take you through not only obviously Ronald's life, but it's going to show you like some of the pitfalls of publishing and not putting all your eggs in one basket. And like we talked about Silver Shamrock, everybody that had all their stuff published to them, they're scrambling. So having multiple publishers, self-publishing, running that gambit, I think is very important. And that was one of the big things I took away from that book was just, don't put all your eggs in one basket, and bet on yourself, pretty much.
In a way, it's like a magic mushroom trip or a near-death experience, because when you come out of those two, you're extremely grateful for what you do have. You start to reassess everything else, and you go, "Man, I've had all these great things this whole time, and I never gave a shit about them." And it's like when you read this book, you're going to say, "Man, I have it so fucking easy as a writer right now." Like the world is my oyster when you go through everything that you had to go through to get here today, so.
Sometimes I don't understand all the angst, and I get on social media and everybody's complaining about getting a rejection and all that, and I kind of roll my eyes.
Yeah, get used to it.
Yeah,
everybody gets them.
So back then we complained to ourselves because we didn't have anybody to complain to, so.
Yell at the typewriter. Like we said, Southern Fried is going to be excellent. Ron, what's the release date for Paperback on it? Do you know yet?
Paperback, well, the official release date is September the 6th. So they'll do the pre-order of the paperback, and I think the ebook, the paperback and hardcover will be, the pre-order will be in a week or two. Jared wanted to put like 2 weeks between the limited edition and the regular books, and so on. We're going to have the book launch on September the 3rd, which will be 3 days before the official release. So,
I also go ahead. I'm sorry.
If anybody's in the Tennessee area or wants to take a little road trip, come out and see me. And we're going to have food, and we're going to have some door prizes and all kinds of cool stuff. We're going to have Jeff and Lynn, and who knows, I've invited James Newman and Brian Smith, and they might show up. There's going to be a lot of, and a whole lot of my my books of horror family is going to be there, and a lot of my readers. So I don't know if that little depot is going to hold everybody.
I think it would be a crime if we didn't talk about that awesome cover that Justin T. Coons did for this book.
Oh, I am so blessed with that cover.
Yeah, that cover's amazing. I mean, all of his covers are, but it's nice to see, because we've seen a lot of his covers through, more popularly through the Splatter Westerns. Yeah. But when he did this cover with all your monsters in the background, like, it just looks absolutely amazing. So again, we're still planning, me and Wes Souther are still planning on kidnapping Justin Coons at some point, just hold him in the basement to draw some covers for us. But yeah, the cover's amazing.
He said that was the first time he'd actually painted an actual person on the cover. And too many people said, well, there's Southern Fried Alfred Hitchcock on cover.
Yeah.
Which that's fine with me. I love Alfred Hitchcock.
Yeah.
I was a little chunkier when I, he did that picture.
Canvas had 10 pounds.
I think so.
It is beautiful, though. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Talking of covers, I just want to transition to something else. Your 3 chapbooks coming out. Luke Spooner did the covers on those.
Oh, yeah.
They're amazing. Can you tell us a little bit about those chapbooks? Because I know you released something recently. I know the pre-order's up, I believe.
Yeah,
pre-orders. And you kind of gave a little insight to what they contain. So do you want to talk about those?
Well, when I mentioned to Jared, back when I was pitching him Southern Fried and Horrified, that I'd like to do, maybe a collection with some of my darker rural, real rural Southern stories, maybe a few of the old ones and some new ones, and then he said, well, I'd like to put them out like chapbooks, because we're kind of planning a chapbook run. And I said, well, that would be great, and so he accepted the Southern Fried and Horrified, and then he said, well, don't forget about those chapbooks. And so I got them together, and each one's got like one of my old vintage Ronald Kelly stories. I picked some of my best, stories, and then there's a new one, per book, and just kind of give you a taste of then and now, kind of my Southern Fried horror kind of writing and everything, and so yeah, I'm really excited about them, and chapbooks were really popular back in my day, back in the mid to late 80s and early 90s. I mean, there was a lot of chapbooks, and then they stopped putting them out. People, I guess, the new the new indie publishers, they can put out a novella, and that's basically kind of like how the chapbooks were back then. But I'm glad to see Death's Head putting out all these series. Dan, I know you got one. Aaron has got some coming out, and a bunch of other really great writers. So and I was really happy to get, because you got your bucket list of publishers you'd like to work with, and when I got stuff accepted by both Death's Head and Stygian Sky, that was like I jumped for joy, because I really respect Jared and Jeremy and Patrick, what they've done with those publishing houses, and it's great to be involved with that roster of work that they're putting out.
Absolutely. I think I speak for both Dan and I when I say it's an honor that we'll be able to release some stuff along with you, kind of, with the series. So we're excited about that.
I'm looking forward to reading it. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely looking forward to reading these. And I think going back to what you said about then and now, I mean, to the listeners, the readers, and the writers, you know, I think the Essential Six stuff, right? That's pretty much like a then and now, and that won your Splatterpunk Award. So last time Ron Kelly did then and now, he won an award. So I mean, you're going to get some of that with this. So I think this is probably one that you probably want to reserve. And the bundles are up on it's Death's Head Press. It looks like those are on right now. So
yeah, you can buy them individually or you can buy them in a bundle, but it looks like everybody's buying the bundle because they want all of them. So
yeah,
good.
It's kind of a no-brainer, the bundle, I feel like. You know? Like, plus the artwork's so cool for them, too.
It is,
you know what I mean? Like,
that's the thing, like the artwork and the color scheme that Luke used for all the art. Like, I've seen a couple of covers between, the three of ours, and just the color scheme that he picked out, and it just fits the stories so well, and I think they just they're captivating, and why wouldn't you want to get them as a whole collection? Especially if any of your chapbooks kind of link together, if there's any kind of connection between the stories in them.
Yeah, I know yours are, Dan. I'm really looking forward to reading what kind of world you put together in your 3 chapbooks.
Yeah, mine are going to be they're interesting. We'll see what the readers think, but they're the ultimate judge. But I got my covers obviously, and they're amazing, and I've seen Aaron's as well, and they look great. And like we've said, there's some really high caliber authors that are joining us in these in the release of these chapbooks. So it's going to be a good couple, probably, I don't even know, probably another year of these things probably coming out. And I see like more and more people are jumping on board. I think Jeff Strand is on board, Candace Noah, Christopher Ruffty. So it's going to be a great time, I'm sure.
It is, yeah.
Absolutely. I think, how are we doing on time for you, Ron? Do you have a few more minutes still?
Oh, yeah. Let's keep going.
Okay, cool. Because I think it's a shame, unfortunately, Carver had something come up and he couldn't be here for this. But I know that, like, you talk about your faith a little bit in the book, too. And sort of like how it's not like that you intentionally separate it. It's just not something that you overly think about when writing. To you, it's just sort of a story, right? Like, and it's like you're just going into a world. And I know you said, and I think this is something that people can apply to things outside of religion too, just views in general. You never really want to be preachy in the books because like you're going to alienate certain parts of the audience. Yeah. And like you said in your introduction to the Halloween store, you know what I mean? Like, reading's an escape. And, I know in your introduction to that, you were kind of talking about not so much wrapping specific current events into writing and kind of contaminating the fantasy of it for the readers who are looking for that escape. That's what we're providing them. So, do you want to talk about just like your faith in horror, or how you approach that at all, or?
Well, that's something I've struggled with for probably the whole time I've been writing, because when you write horror, you pretty much you got to pull out all the stops. You can't sanitize it. That's what I think. A lot of people these days want you to sanitize it. They want you to write what will make them comfortable. I'm sure. I don't want to get all into the trigger warning thing and all that, but when you're when you're a person of faith, and you write horror, it's like when I write extreme horror, I almost have to disconnect myself to write that. Now, I go to church, and the church folks, they know what I write. They know I'm a writer, and they know what I write. nobody's ever condemned me for that, you know, and that's a good thing. But I wouldn't want them to sit down and read Essential Six stuff or something like that. But, because there's some of those stories in there, you know, they probably, you know, boot me out the door or something like that. But yeah, I mean, for, you know, when I started writing, you know, I was kind of hesitant about letting my mother read stuff because, you know, I didn't want to offend her. You know, she was a very devout Christian lady and all that, but she did love horror. I mean, when I was, you know, when I was pretty young, when I was like 11, 12 years old, she'd take me to horror movies because Daddy wouldn't go with her and take me to some like really bloody horror movies, and that's one thing that, you know, kind of got me interested in everything. But yeah, you know, I just think, you know, if you you got to be honest when you write, whatever you write. I mean, if you write, you know, horror, you know, you've got to make it realistic. You can't, you know, you can't pull your punches, you know, and I mean, it kind of flies in the face of what I believe, you know, some of my beliefs and everything, because you know, people like me aren't supposed to be writing this stuff, but you know, I've kind of come to terms with it, and I just, you know, I try to write having fun. I don't like to write really dark, you know, depressing horror. You know, I like to put a little nostalgia in it, and where everybody's going to have a good time. You know, that's why I've been started putting out these EC flavored collections. You know, the Haunt of Southern Fried Fear and everything that just came out, because you know, the old comic books and you know, stuff like we grew up with, you know, Famous Monsters magazine and all that. You know, that kind of, that's what I grew up with, and that's still in my heart, you know, and so, you know, I try to, I mean, there's a lot of stuff I've written that, you know, you could read and probably couldn't tell that I was, you know, a man of faith or anything, but I've had people say, well, it shows through anyway, you know. Yeah, but you know, I've come to terms with, you know, I'm comfortable now with the kind of horror I write, and I don't worry too much about it like I did in my younger days, you know, thinking maybe I was doing something wrong or anything like that. But I just say to, you know, if there's more Christian horror writers who are Christian than we think out there, because I've had them come to me, you know, and you know, for advice and ask him, you know, should I be doing this and everything, and I you know, I tell them, well, you know, if you come to terms with it and you know, you think you want to write this kind of stuff and you feel good about it, then yeah, I think you should do it.
Yeah, and it's like when you think about how much good stuff comes out of it, like,
Yeah.
you know, right? It's like, sure, it's a fictitious story, but there's so many people that get aided and helped via these stories. Like, we talk about this on the show quite a bit, just like some of the incredible moments that we've had with readers, or that we've heard that other authors have had with readers. You know, some of this stuff is life-saving. Like, you would never think that. It somehow it is, though. And so it's like, just because certain people look at it, you know, through one lens, doesn't mean that, you know, it's not different for a lot of other people, you know? And so, but I'm sorry, Roland, go ahead.
So, as a man of faith, is there a certain subject that you will not write about because it's just too uncomfortable for you?
I don't want to write stuff that's blasphemous. I don't use the F word, or use the Lord's name in vain. That's about the three things that I stay away from, And I mean, I don't condemn anybody who writes in that manner. That's their choice, and they usually do it very well and tasteful and everything. But that's just my personal. That's how. That's just my personal choice. There's certain things that I won't touch on. Now there was a couple of things in After the Burn that looking back, I think, how did I how did I actually go there? But I didn't go back and take it out of the book or anything. I've written it, so it's there. Warts and all. So you'll probably know it when you read it, and you'll probably find it in there. But
yeah, it's interesting you say how you cut some of the profanity out, because even without the profanity and just some of those other things you talked about, like there's the scene in Fear, and obviously I don't want to ruin it, but there's a scene with Roscoe and stuff when they're on their travels, and there's no profanity or any kind of really vulgarity in language, but just the emotion you convey just through the prose itself is like it's almost like astonishing the way that you convey it without having to go crazy and put F words and curses on every single page, and just the hatred you're able to drive out of some of the characters in that is really impeccable. And that was obviously one of the harder scenes towards the end and stuff like that. And obviously I'm not going to spoil it because I think everybody should read it.
That's the big crying scene. Everybody cries over that.
Yeah, and
many people tell me you made me cry.
I think for that book, it's got to be pretty cool to you, because I think the majority of people, at least that I know, horror readers, will list that as one of their top 5 coming of age novels. And a lot of people I've seen, if you say, what's your top 5 coming of age, it's usually It, what is it, Boy's Life by Mike Hammond, and Fear are really ones that are up there.
It's good company to be in, I tell you.
yeah, they're all right. Those other two.
Yeah, they do all right. Yeah.
I've actually had people tell me it's one of their top 10 books, period, and that's like Well-Read Beard said that it's one of his top 10 books of all time, and one of his top 5 horror books of all time. And
I think Nick Gray has a tattoo of it on him, doesn't he?
He does. Actually, he does. He has the snake critter tattoo.
Yeah. So I mean, if that's not devotion, and I don't know what is. I mean, I've never seen anybody love a book. Actually, I have a gunslinger tattoo, so I guess I can't say that. I've never seen anybody do that. But yeah.
Actually, that's not the first Ron Kelly tattoo that's been made. Somebody did the werewolf from Undertaker's Noon one time. Alex McVeigh did the artwork, and he actually did a tattoo artwork for somebody to have on. I forgot where they put it. I think it was on their bicep or something like that.
That's all. That's got to be such a cool feeling. I don't know if it's a cool feeling or an odd feeling to have somebody tattoo a character of yours on their body, but it's definitely got to be a humbling feeling that somebody likes your work that much. They're willing to go to that extreme.
I told Nick, you sure you want to do that, Nick? You want to carry that ugly thing on you the rest of your life?
Yeah, Nick's awesome.
Yeah, Nick's a great kid, and I think also as far as what was it? Oh God, I lost it. I'm sorry, guys. I have this question lined up, but I was expecting Roland to come and interrupt me.
Yeah, man, I wish Carver was here to mess up. But it had to be Aaron today.
It's all on me, guys.
I brought my brass balls with me, and he didn't even show up. We did that, and when Carver blurbs your balls, they're in good hands. So
his hands are very smooth. So he moisturizes daily.
Okay.
He gave me that blurb, and I thought, everybody else were being all respectful and everything with their blurbs and stuff, and then he comes in with that, and I thought that is just, that's my blurb, that needs to be on the book.
That is awesome. So speaking of how we were kind of on the subject of, what I was going to say, actually, it just came back to me, is like, Yeah, I wanted to tell you, like, I didn't even notice that you didn't use the F word, like,
Yeah.
or like that kind of stuff.
Mhm.
Like, I didn't even notice it because there were other elements in the story that were like highly disturbing when I was listening to the audiobook recently. That's like, it didn't even cross my mind. And it's like, I used to really respect the comedian Sinbad
Yeah.
because he was a clean comic and he was incredibly funny. Like, he'd make you cry when on his specials, like back in the like '90s and stuff, you know. And there's an art to that, and it takes a higher, like Dan was saying, it's like a higher prose almost that you have to make up for the cheap shots that, you know, me and Roland like to give them.
We have to use profanity.
I appreciate that. I mean, you know, maybe I'm doing something right then. You know, if I can pull that off, because you know, nowadays, you know, you pretty much have to go, you know, go there. A lot of the readers expect it, but you know, if you can read my stuff and you don't even miss it, you know, that's a good compliment.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
almost like a Mandela effect because I didn't even, when you said that, I'm like, no, I had to have read a couple of them and, you know, F-bombs and fear. And I'm like, I'm going to have to go back and take a look through it now because the whole time I was thinking that, especially in some of those really brutal scenes, even with the snake critter there, I'm like, had to have put it in there. But I mean, I'll take your word for it. I mean, I think you know the book pretty well by now, but it's definitely impressive to be able to do that. I think Will Smith is another one like that too, right? Like I don't think he cursed at all or he's assaulting people. Yeah, with his
Yeah,
raps.
just slaps people.
Yeah.
But speaking of fear, you gave a teaser away at the end, toward the end of your autobiography there.
Mhm.
Are we able to talk about that, or is that something you just
Yeah.
want people to read in the book?
Yeah, yeah, I'm gonna write a sequel to Fear. I've actually got the last chapter written and it's in stone. It's not gonna change. So, and that's the first time I've actually gone and written the last chapter of a book. You know, that's kind of strange, but you know, for a long time, you know, for a long time, Fear wasn't. You know, I didn't consider Fear any more special than any of my other books, and then I came back to writing, and everybody that's the book that everybody talked about and was inspired by, and so um, I thought, well, you know, I'd like to write a sequel to it, you know, but I was always hesitant because you know I want to do it justice. I didn't want to just slap something together, you know, because it had maybe some of the same characters and stuff like that in it, and it was in the same setting, which this book is going to be similar in ways, but completely different in other ways. So,
And
um,
like, I know Brian Keene was saying that you were like a big influence on him, and like, I read Ghoul not that long ago, which I was really late to the party on that, but it was just incredible. And so I haven't read Fear yet, but it really like makes me anxious to check that out because just like what he did with Ghoul, and I love, like, I know you were talking about coming of age horror a little bit in the autobiography and just kind of like how it became like a lost art sort of for a
kind
period
of
a little bit.
for a while, yeah. But I'm seeing it resurface. You know, it's it was really popular. You know, back in the you know like late '80s and early '90s, and then I guess when you know Brian started writing, and you know he did a few. You know, he did Ghoul, and there was some you know elements of coming of age and his stuff and some other writers too. So, yeah, I think it takes spells where it kind of goes away and then it comes back.
Yeah, it's just, I think it's an important thing though, you know, like, and it shouldn't be forgotten because those were some of the stories that had the biggest impact on me when I was a kid, you know, like watching those coming of age and like sort of envisioning yourself in those roles. And it's weird because like a lot of those stories aren't designed for kids, but somehow they get into the hands of kids, and then it's like, you know, it can have a pretty cool impact. But that's awesome. So people should be really stoked about Fear 2. Is there any kind of like direct sales that you're doing or anything like that? Like, I know you obviously do plenty of signed paperbacks, but is there anywhere that people can visit to check out your stuff?
Just well, I mean, you can always get it on Amazon, but you won't be getting it signed and everything. Yeah, I mean, I have all my books that are in paperback. I have copies of them. So if except for Fear right now, Fear I don't have any copies. I don't have Hell Hollow, but Hell Hollow's coming back because um, um, Crossroads is fixing to put out a paperback of Hell Hollow. So, but I mean, if anybody wants signed books with the artwork in them on the title page, just get a hold of me on social media. Messenger or on tweet or tweet. Don't tweet me, but you can private tweet me, I guess. But and on Instagram, just get a hold of me and I'll show you. I'll let you know what I have, and I always give everybody a good price, and then they get that artwork in it, and so I do really well selling books. I didn't always, up till a couple of years ago, I didn't have any books printed that I could actually sell. I mean, I had some of the old Zebra books and I sold them years ago, and I wish I had some left to sell. I'm sure a lot of people would be hungry for those because, it's funny because I had my wife had a friend, and when I was writing Zebra books, we thought, well, what if the house burns down? Your books are going to burn up, and so I put all these this mint Zebra books in this box and gave it to my wife's friend, and she put them up in her closet. And so 20 years later, I thought, I told my wife, I said, Joyce, does your friend still have those Zebra books? And she said, yeah. And so we got in touch with her, and she gave me that box of Zebra, and I opened it up, and there's all these vintage Zebra books, from years,
Man, that's
years
awesome.
ago.
Treasure trove there.
Yeah.
I actually have one of the things that you sent with your signed books, and it's your bibliography.
Yeah.
And like that's just the first side of it.
Uh-huh.
And the back side, and obviously that sweet signature on there as well. Like it's just such an amazing body of work. It's only getting bigger.
I've had to revise that, and I'm fixing to get a bunch more printed up because things have changed since I've. It seems like just in the past year, things have gone so fast, that I'm having to update stuff really fast, and like my bookmarks and everything like that too. And this year alone, there's the bookmark. And this year alone, I've got like 7 or 8 books coming out. Maybe more if things. It's. I would have. Deadeye 2 was supposed to have been out by now, but Silver Shamrock kind of threw that off track, but I'm finishing up, and we should have it out by the fall. So, things got kind of slowed down for a couple of reasons, but I'm getting things back on track, with some of the books and all that. So, we got several. I think we're gonna have a paperback of The Darken come out, which is the one that had the lizard coming over the top of the mountain. But
so awesome, right?
Now that's kind of a wild book. If you read that, I mean, it's about a bunch of changelings on a mountain in Tennessee, and they can change into anything. And like I have the Darken changing into the Frankenstein monster, or ninjas, or dinosaurs, or anything you can think of, he's going to turn into to kill these people who are, like trying to strip mine the mountain and all that. And so, but the Darken is actually, I mean, he's not the enemy, he's the protagonist in this book. So it's like the monster in this book is the hero. So, when that comes out, I advise you to pick up a copy of that, because it was a wild ride. Zebra didn't know what to do with it. They said it was like it had fantasy elements, science fiction, horror, and they just they just kind of pulled their hair out on that one because they didn't know how to market it. You know?
I remember when you were writing about that, you were like, they were like, "What is this exactly? Like, what is this?"
It was fun to write. I mean, it's fun to read too. You know, whenever I do like a new paperback or something, I get to read it all over again. And it might have been, you know, 20-something years. I mean, it's 27 years since I wrote Fear. You know, so when I reread one of these Zebra paperbacks, it's like, you know, it's been that long since I've actually read the thing. You know, so
That's awesome.
Sometimes it's a good thing, sometimes it's a bad thing. You know?
Right? It's scary cracking that sucker open.
Because like in Undertaker Moon, I think I used the word bestial about 2,000 times. I thought, well, that must have been my favorite word back then. You know?
Yeah.
Well, I think
that's always fun.
You know what? We've been like, this conversation's been so awesome that it's like we totally forgot about. At least I did. I forgot about the listener questions. Do you think we could? Do you think we could just do a couple of rapid fire questions?
Sure.
Because there's people that were hoping to ask you questions on the boards.
Yeah, fine.
Sorry about that.
Ronald, while we were talking, Dawn was messaging me and she said that she loves you. She's reading submissions right now, and I'm like, I'm interviewing Ronald Kelly right now. She's like, oh, okay, I'm sorry. I tell him I love him. I'm like, all right, I'll be sure to let him know. So, all right, Roland, hit us with some questions.
She's a sweetheart. I love her.
Oh, we had her on last week. We interviewed
Oh
her.
yeah, I'm looking forward to that. I know she's going to be a hoot.
It was a good one.
She was a good time. She was a good time. All right, Roland, you're up. We'll try not to interrupt you like you've been doing the entire show.
I'm not reading the last question now. You can read that one. So Jeffrey Little, you answered this question, but I'll just have you briefly recap it. How has the horror game changed from your early days? And is it hard to get published today? Sorry, that's 2 questions.
How has it changed? It's gotten so much more diversified. As far as the different sort of people that's writing it. I mean, it's diversified in that way. It's also very diversified as far as the subject matter. I mean, you've got all elements of horror. You know, extreme horror. You've got quiet horror. You got gay horror. You got indigenous horror. You got so many different choices of what you can read and enjoy nowadays. So it wasn't always like that back then. I mean, when I was writing, there were a few women writing. Mostly, it was just us old white guys, writing. But now it's so much better than it was back then. I mean, everybody's involved, and it's just a joy to indulge in what's coming out. I mean, I just love all the I've got two bookshelves of books from indie writers that I message them personally to buy their books and everything. I ain't got to read all of them because I write more than I read these days, but yeah, I mean it's so much better as far as what's available out there than it used to be. And what was the second part of the question?
Is it harder to get published today?
I don't think it's harder. I think it's a lot easier because you've got more options. You've got all these indie presses that's and you've got self-publishing you can turn to if you want to. Back then, you pretty much had to rely on these little magazines to publish in. I mean, there was like several dozen. They're all gone now, but that's how you start out. Cutting your teeth thing, and then if you wanted to go beyond that, you had to go to the paperbacks, and that's all. And that's a hard. It's kind of a hard go for an old Tennessee boy like me. I was lucky that I reached that level back then, that I got to write paperbacks for a while. But I think it's easier nowadays. I mean, there's all these indie presses, and they're very receptive to new work and everything. And back then, a lot of the publishers only wanted established names. Indie publishers are more receptive to new writers who aren't widely known or established yet. So yeah, I think we're doing really well, nowadays.
I think too that now, as opposed to back then, like you said, you'd start writing in magazines, and then it was mass market paperbacks. Whereas now it seems like there's so many intermediary publishers where you might get a nice deal with not a big 5 or big 4 publisher, but somebody a little bit higher up than just a 1 or 2 person operation indie publisher. Or you might want to stick with that 1 or 2 person indie publisher and keep going with that. So I definitely think that the intermediary publishing world is huge right now.
Right. Yeah.
Daniel, you want to take the next question?
I sure can. This is from Donna Latham, who is a phenomenal listener, reader. Yeah, she's awesome. She wants to know, do you have a collection of your Zebra editions? And is there any book of yours you would like to rewrite? If so, which one and why?
Looking back, I don't think I'd want to rewrite it. I mean, they were that was the vision I had at the time I wrote it. And I mean, I could probably write it a little bit better now, because, basically when Zebra hired you, you were a novice and you learned novel writing and a lot of the, plotting and everything as you wrote book by book, and I can see where I improved as I went along, and by the time I got to Fear, I think I got nailed down, I think. But I don't think there's any of my books that I would go back and rewrite or change. Like a lot of writers might have like Brian King's put out his author's edition of Terminal, which might have had some things in it that were cut by the publisher and all that. But the one thing about Zebra, they didn't cut much out. They just pretty much gave you full reign, and I don't know if that was a good thing or a bad thing, but they didn't cut a lot, do a lot of editing. I think they might have just been lazy. I don't know, but
they just like to mess with your titles. They didn't want to edit your book.
Yeah,
they just want to screw your titles around.
Yeah, and crappy covers and stuff.
Skeletons. Do you still have any of your Zebras? You have that box you said, or do you still?
Yeah. Well, I've got one that I had for years, and then I found the box. So I've got two sets of my Zebra books. They're both finished. They've never been read, so I guess my kids can fight over them. I got 3 kids and 2 sets of Zebra books, so they're gonna fight over them, I guess. The one thing about my kids, they're used to Daddy being a horror writer. They don't think anything about it. I mean, they just they're proud of me and everything. But I'll show them one of my book covers. And my littlest, my boy, he's 14 now, but he's autistic and he's high functioning autistic, but. I'll show him one of my covers and he'll look at me like, are you a serial killer and killed my daddy and took his place or something like that? But yeah, I just I've got a few Zebra books that I'm hanging on to.
Oh yeah, I don't blame you. Keep hang on to them forever. All right.
I interrupted again.
Yeah, I know. All right. So our next question comes from the wonderful Ruth Ann Jag, who we mentioned earlier. Awesome author in her own right, and just one of probably the nicest people I think I've ever met online. I can't wait to meet her in person. Hopefully, I think she's going to AuthorCon next year, so it'll be really cool to hang out with her. She said that you are one of her favorites, and she'd love to know if he plans out his stories and characters ahead, or do they begin speaking to him as he writes? So, are you a pantser or an outliner?
With novels, I'm an outliner. I pretty much, I don't do a physical outline, but I've got it all worked out in my head, chapter by chapter, pretty much, and it doesn't usually vary during the writing process. Now, the one book that did was Father's Little Helper, or 12 Gauge. There, I'm using that title again, but it totally went dark. I mean, I originally was going to have it be like this crime, just a plain kind of crime, serial killer pursuit kind of book, and it just turned really bloody and dark real fast. It just took a fork in the road and went opposite of what it's probably the most bloody book I've written, but with short stories, it's different. I'll have a germ of an idea for a short story, and I'll just sit down and start writing, and the characters just kind of play off each other. That's the same way with Deadeye. When I started writing Deadeye, I've got the characters of Deadeye, the zombie gunfighter, and Job, the black mojo man, and they play off each other like, and I don't even know where it comes from. It's just like it's almost like a Hap and Leonard kind of relationship between the two, and I put so much. It's like I don't want to write horror. I want to write everything funny in this book. I put so much humor in these books, this dark humor and everything that it's been so fun to write Deadeye. And this second Deadeye book it's gonna be a monster fest. It's got werewolves and swamp creatures and ghosts and everything in it. And I mean, as far as like, I'd say novellas and short stories, I just make it up as I go. I might have a germ idea and maybe an idea of how it's going to end, because most of my short stories kind of have ambiguous endings and kind of end on I've had people say, "Why I don't like your short stories because I don't know what happened at the end." I said, "Well, that's the way a short story is, and that's you're supposed to kind of make it up in your." I remember Nick Dennis or Nick Gray. He loves Mr. Mack and the Monster Mobile that was in the. It was in
the Halloween store, right?
Halloween.
That's a really good one. I like that one too.
Yeah, that. Now it was in the Mr. Glowbones originally, and he said I would sure like to see how that ended, and it got me thinking. I thought, well, I'm going to write, and that's the only time I've written a sequel to a short story. And I wrote Mr. Mack is back in town, and continued that character and some of the characters that was in the first story. But,
gotcha.
No, that story was I owe that to Nick, because he inspired me to write that sequel to that story.
Shout out Nick, that's a good one. I really enjoyed it. I enjoyed it. Yeah.
That's awesome.
We got a couple more still, or?
Yep. Roland, you want to do the next one from Mary?
Oh, Mary, I love it. From Mary Danner.
Mm-hmm.
Do you ever get like writer's block, and how do you work through this?
I have gotten writer's block before, but around the time I wrote The Buzzard Zone, I should have had that thing written in 3 or 4 months, and it took me 3 years. I got kind of in a funky mood. Kind of a lot happened during that time. We had in our family, we had 7 people, close family members, pass away in a 2-year period, and it just depressed me, and I got to where I just didn't want to write, and I wasn't very inspired to write it during that time. So I had this secret writing project, which was the zombie novel, and by the time I finished writing, the Buzzard Zone, everybody was sick of zombies. So, that kind of fell flat on its face. And that was one thing that kind of, I kind of got around 2019, I got to the point where I almost thought about quitting again because, it didn't seem like anybody was reading my stuff and all that. And then it just took off in 2020. 2020 was a good year for me. I mean, it was a bad year for a lot of people, but it put me back on track. I mean, I did more writing in 2020 than I'd done years before. So I don't know if it was because I was more isolated or I don't know, this whole COVID thing kind of put things in perspective that, we've lost so much through this COVID thing. It's been even in my business that I work a full-time job at, there's things we have a hard time getting. I mean, it's the supply issue and everything, and just finding workers to work, because a lot of people don't want to work anymore. It doesn't seem like, at least not factory jobs,
Mm-hmm.
and it's just. But as far as I've talked to several writers, and they said 2020 and 2021 was their most prolific periods, and so I think something kicked us in the pants, when COVID came around and we couldn't go out, to movie theaters and go to restaurants and stuff like that. We'd sit home and write. So maybe in a way for some people it was a catalyst to get back to business.
Yeah.
I almost think that might be the case for like some readers too. Like
I think so too.
They
had more time to read, instead of going out and going to movies and going out and doing errands and stuff like that. They were isolated, so they turned to books, and Netflix and streaming and stuff. But you can only go so far with streaming before everything's dried up. I mean, you can only watch so many series and everything before you. So I think that's another reason maybe we're having a big resurgence of the horror genres, because people got more into reading again. I see more readers now than I did several years ago.
Yeah, I think part of it too is like because kind of everybody was cooped up too. A lot of people were expressing themselves through social media, right? And so I think you had even more of an abundance of people on social media, and you had people that were real excited about different books of ours, and many other authors. And that just kind of got stuff to go viral because there was just more people with free time and eyeballs on the screen, and certain things blew up that who knows, maybe the Slob wouldn't have blown up like that if it wasn't for all that. I don't know, but it's like I've seen it with a few different authors, but it's awesome. It's not the COVID stuff, obviously. I fucking hate the COVID stuff. You had a real weird story in your book too about how you got taken out of school, like when you were a kid, like some clandestine government shit. Like I'll let you tell the story. What was it that happened?
Well, when I was in the first grade. It might have been. It was either first grade or kindergarten. They put the whole class. Actually, they took all the classes in the school and put them on school buses. Took us across town to this high school and lined us up. Made us take off our clothes except for our drawers and stuff, and gave us an examination and gave us a shot. And then we got dressed again, but got back on the bus and went back to school. Well, a couple of days later, my arm started hurting something awful, and it was all bruised up and everything. And my mama started asking questions and wanting to know what the shot. She took me to the pediatrician, and he said, "Well, somebody's giving this shot, And I'd only gotten shots from my pediatrician. I'd never got them anywhere else. And My mama went ballistic. My mama was a meek little nice lady until you got her fired up, and she was, she's ready to tear somebody's another asshole or something like that. But she went. She went to the teachers and she went to the school board, and everybody denied it. They said, "Well, we don't know what you're talking about,"
Oh.
And she just about went as far up to the state legislature wanting to know, and the neighbors had kids that said the same thing. So it wasn't like I was making it up or anything, and my arm was just killing me and everything. So she tried to find out what this shot was, and she never did find out. So I who knows, maybe that's why maybe there's a bunch of horror writers out there, and that's what turned them into horror writers that shot it.
Sorry, I didn't mean to sidetrack from the listener questions, but I just thought that was like super creepy and weird.
Yeah, it's still weird. Who knows,
But is that everything, or did we?
No, Roland, go ahead. Go on to the next one.
3 more. Nikki Fontana wants to know, who is your biggest influence? Any characters based on you? Where is your favorite place to write? 3 questions.
Biggest influence.
Yes.
I would have to say at the beginning it was King, was because he showed me that you could make a living doing this, that you could, I don't think a lot of us would be doing this if it wasn't for that he came in at just the right time and made horror kind of acceptable again, because it was, when I was reading books when I was a teenager, at the beginning, I was just reading the classics. I wouldn't, there didn't seem to be very much, new horror being written until King came along. And so King was a big influence. When I started out in the small press and everything, Joe Lansdale was a big influence. And Joe Lansdale was kind of a sort of a mentor to me then, because, I would call him up and he'd give me advice and I'd ask him questions. I was in, he gave me my first blurb, and that was nice. So Joe has always been a big influence on me, and Robert McCammon's been a big influence. So I'd say, and lately, when I came back, it was Brian King and some of the new writers like that. Okay, and the next part of the question.
Yeah, the next part of the question is, do you have any characters based on you?
Well, as a child, I'd say Jeb Sweeney and Fear was kind of based on me. I wasn't a farm boy or anything, but I lived out in the country, and we'd take off. It was during the day, those days when you could just take off after breakfast and come back after dark, and
Yes.
your parents didn't care. They didn't think anything about it. And so we'd go out in the woods and we'd tramp around. We'd find old cow skulls where cows would wander out into the woods and die, and we'd find their bones and stuff like that. And we get on our bicycles and ride for miles and miles and miles, where we shouldn't have been probably, because but it's like on Halloween. There goes Toby again. But anyway, it's like on Halloween, we went all over town trick or treating, and our parents didn't follow us around with the car or anything like that, and it could have been dangerous. There was you didn't hear about people molesting children as much back then, but I think it was just kind of a hidden thing back then. I think it's probably went on as much as it does now, but yeah, it was a different time back then. But yeah, I think Jeb was, maybe a big part of me is in Jeb. And lately, I think in my Southern Fried, EC collection, I think the old storytellers is pretty much me. You know, if you look at my drawing of him, he's got my hat on. He kind of looks like me a little bit, but he's a little uglier than me. But you know, he likes to tell stories like I like to tell stories. Okay, and what was the third one?
What is your favorite place to write? Do you have like a writing den or?
I do. I used to have a study all to myself, and then I had kids, and that kind of put that away. But I've got a little corner of the living room all set up now with my bookcases and all that, and so I write there. Maybe. I mean, I've got a 14-year-old and a 17-year-old, so maybe in a few years they'll be out on the road, and I can get me a bed, one of the bedrooms back. But yeah, pretty much where I can find time to write, I'll write.
2 more questions. Well,
I don't think we're
we're
going to ask him the last question. Ronald Kelly's a gentleman. I don't think he wants to hear the last question. We'll have to reprimand Spike.
Fine.
Go ahead, Roland. Or do you want to?
I thought you were going to ask the last one because I was like, no, I'm not asking.
No, Roland. Come on.
So RJ Rolls wants to know: do you have any regrets in your writing career?
Yes, and it all goes to the keeping all your eggs in one basket thing. It's but I mean the way the times were back in the Zebra days, you had one publisher. You really didn't publish with all the different publishers and everything. So maybe it really didn't apply, because when I lost that publisher, all the other publishers were down on hard. They saw it as poison. I mean, it got to the point where the readers were getting burnt by bad books, and they wouldn't buying books, and the editors were just ditching their horror lines left and right. So, but if I had stayed more connected to my small press days, you know, my editor friends and stuff like that, maybe I could have made it through, you know, without quitting horror, without quitting for 10 years, because Richard Sismar was starting to do his hardcovers around that time, and if I had stayed more closely connected with him and some other people in the industry, maybe I could have made it through. But you know, when you get, I hate to say you get the big head, but when you get like to writing paperback books and stuff like that, it's like you're going to the next level and you've left that scene behind. But you know, I don't see that nowadays. I see that as, you know, being a little asshole-ish, you know. But you know, back then, I mean, that was you had progression of what level you want to get to, and you really didn't go back and write short stories for the little small press, because you were a professional writer then. So, but when I came back, I thought, I'm not gonna put all my work with one publisher. I'm gonna go with several. And right now, I've got Thunderstorm, I've got Crossroads, I've got Death's Head, Stygian Sky, D&T. What else I've got? I did have Silver Shamrock. I don't have any more. But yeah, I've got a number of publishers I work with, and I think that's a good thing. I think if you're well established and you've got, you know, a lot of work that you want to put out, I think it's better to kind of farm it out to different publishers.
Yeah, it's like you could almost relate that even to like in a household, like, oh, you know, me and my wife, we work for the same company. That could be dangerous, you know, like if something happens with the company, then you're completely out of money. It's the same thing with being an author, you know. It's like that's 2 revenue streams going into the family. When you're an author, it's like you want to have multiple in case one gets tangled up to keep you floating. But That's great advice, and we appreciate you hanging in there to answer all the questions. I know we've been going for a while, so we're going to wrap up now. But is there, as we always do, we like to ask, is there a reader that you might want to recognize? We typically like to recognize one on the show each time.
Well, we've already talked about him. Nick is he's my reader. I attribute Nick to bringing fear back from the dead, pretty much, because when Nick read it, he loved it so much that he with his YouTube videos and posting, he got other people interested in it, and it just, the ball started rolling with fear again. So Nick's to blame for that, and I'm very grateful. I mean, I love the guy. I saw him at Scares That Cares last year, and he was nervous as everything, and I took him aside and I said, "You don't have to be nervous around me, because we're buds." So and Nick's told me, and he's been honest with this. He's told this before, and he's telling it that we've got a testimonial section in the new Fear of how fear affected certain people, and Nick's been honest about that. That fear practically saved his life, because Nick's a suicide survivor, and he was in a dark place when he read Fear, and it got him through it, and I'm very very humbled by that, and I just love the guy. When I think of if anybody asks me what reader that I cherish the most, he's at the top of the list.
Yeah, absolutely. Nick's a good guy. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, man. I was just going to say Nick's great, though. Happy to see him continue to release his books, too, and do his Splatter Inc. publishing and live his dream. And, yeah, that just shows you, what I mean, the power of horror. People will look at it, what we do sometimes, and be like, well, that's just entertainment. That's just silly, junk food for the brain. But that's why I say, the longer you hang around, and you've been around way longer than us, and it's, you've seen so much, and, to be able to have that impact on somebody is incredible, and it's awesome that Nick would share that too. So.
Yeah, Nick is great, and what Ronald was mentioning about his YouTube channel is Spooky Noodles. If anyone wants to check out Nick's YouTube channel, Spooky Noodles, he does a lot of book reviews, some stuff he talks about with his own work, Splatter Inc. as well, and that's obviously a really great pick. Nick's read almost all of our stuff, always supportive, always one of the first ones out there to support an indie author, and I couldn't think of a better person for you to pick. And obviously he's like a Ronald Kelly diehard. I think the picture of him with you last year and stuff, he looked so great. Nervous and stuff, but he just looked excited. So that's got to be a really, really cool feeling for him to have met you like that. And
it was cool for me too, because I've been wanting to meet him for a long time.
Yeah, and I'd be remiss too if I didn't say thank you to Nick for, he's done videos for me as well. He's bought signed hardcovers, paperbacks. Like, he's reached out many times, and constantly supporting not only me, but I think all of us to some extent in different ways,
He was one of the first reviews, especially a video review. I think it was the first video review I ever had for Billy Silver, and I think it was a video review, but he did that right away. He was really cool about it, very receptive, and just a great guy all around.
Yeah, I agree.
All right, well, then very, very last thing before we sign off, since we used to recognize authors and highlight them on the show when it was just the four of us doing it, but now that we're interviewing people, we like to get their perspective on an up-and-coming author that you think maybe more people should read that maybe not enough people are reading.
The one I have in mind, she's only had one book out, but I read that book and I was so impressed. I didn't, when I first met her, I didn't know she was a writer, but I'm talking about Bridget Nelson, and she's put out Bouquet of Viscera, and I love that book. I love Bridget. She's just a sweet lady, and I met her at Scares That Cares, and she loves to watch me draw in books, and she'd sit there and just watch me draw on people's books. But I think she's gonna be big. I mean, that was some pretty rough stuff, that she wrote, but I think I think she's got a good career ahead of her.
Great pick. I could say too that we got to meet her for the first time, but I had interacted with her online a few times. Very kind, very supportive of everyone.
Yeah.
And then now she gets her moment with her book, and
the book is beautiful. I mean, it's so. I mean, the Lynn's cover to it is beautiful, and so is the interior design. I know Todd Kiesling did the interior design of it, and it's just such a beautiful book just to look at and to read. I mean, there's not an awful lot of beautiful stuff in her story she writes, but she's done really well with this book, and I couldn't be happier for her.
That's a great pick. I haven't read it yet, but just to speak to her character, like Aaron said, I met her in like the hallway of Scares when we first got there, and she was just so nice. And again, my table is right next to Lynn's and Jeff and hers, so it was just cool just to interact with her and just talk with her and stuff. And like you said, the cover is amazing. Like, you don't really realize what it is until you kind of look a little harder into it, and then it just and the reception, the reviews, and everything have seemed to be really, really great. So I'm sure that, like you said, I'm sure she's got a bright future ahead of her, and definitely somebody to be for us to have on our radar in the near future.
Absolutely. All right. Well, this has been awesome. Thank you so much, Ron, for joining us. It was an incredible show. I think we really conveyed, what the new work's about, as far as your autobiography, Southern Fried and Horrified, which the limited edition, if you're going to want one, I know certain people listening to this are going to want one, so make sure you go and get that soon, though, because it is limited, and some of them have already been reserved. Also, 3 chapbooks with Death's Head. That's Death's Head Press, the chapbooks, right? And that's Somewhere South of Hell, the 3-book bundle. So if you want to grab that, it's $25, or you could buy them individually, though, if you want to. And then also the one with D&T. Dan, could you remind me on that one again?
After the Burn.
After
the Burn, that will be out on Godless May 27th and June 10th on Amazon in ebook and paperback. Are you doing a hardcover on that one? Do you know?
Yeah, we're going to do an affordable hardcover on that.
Okay, so ebook, paperback, hardcover on Amazon June 10th, ebook on Godless May 27th.
Mm-hmm.
And Ron, is there anything that you want to say, just to plug anything in particular? We just figured we'd hit the new releases since you got so much. But
I just want to thank y'all for having me on. This has been a blast. I loved every minute of it. I'm very respectful of your work, all your work, and your friendship. I appreciate it very much. And everybody, I hope they check out my new newsletter, the Fear County Chronicle. I'm going to put out issue number 3 tomorrow, and everybody's, getting more and more subscribers. So, look on social media. I've got links where you can subscribe. So, tomorrow we're going to have an old vintage Ron Kelly story from way back in 1989. It's going to be on there. So, you might enjoy that. And some announcements about conventions and stuff, and a little article about After the Burn, and a little preview of some of Zach's interior art that you might enjoy too.
Sounds incredible. So guys, be sure to check out the newsletter and hit him up on social media, give him a follow. And hit them up directly for those signed copies. We know we've got a lot of people that want those signed copies. You get the artwork with these. But again, it's been incredible. Thank you, Ron, for the show. I am Aaron Borogard. You may be familiar with my book, The Slob, Modern Hysteria. I've got a pre-order for The Cuck, my new book coming out.
I love that. I love that cover to that.
Oh, thanks.
It's really creepy.
It's so creepy, right? It freaks me out too.
If I was in a dark room and he came out with that little, what was it, like a cigarette lighter or something like that? Oh man, that would freak me out.
Oh, thank you. This is the best day when Ron Kelly compliments your book. So, but yeah, you guys can feel free to check out my website, abhorror.com. That's where I'm going to be doing some paperback bundles of the book with I got some really cool items that I'm going to be putting together for that. And Dan.
Daniel J. Volpe. My newest book that's out now from Death's Head is Visceral 2. It's a collection of short stories that myself and Patrick C. Harrison III did. They are absolutely disgusting and revolting and violent, and pretty much every disgusting thing you could think of is pretty much in there. So go check that out. Obviously, I have signed copies of that as well. DanielJVolpeHorror.com. You can find all my books there, signed, or Amazon as well. And if you guys haven't checked out my newsletter yet, I know this obviously is going to air before my next one comes out, but in my June newsletter, I'm going to be revealing the cover of a future book called Plastic Monsters, and that one's in the editing phase right now, so that's going to be another pretty brutal body horror book. So, Ron, thank you very much for coming on. We appreciate it. And Roland, give us your last bit, and you could do Carver's too, since you interrupted us all night.
Hey everybody, Roland Bursey Jr., author of Abortion and Paperback as a Witch, a couple of others. You can always find my stuff on Amazon. You can send me a message on Facebook. I have a website, rolandburseyjr.com. So yeah, that's where you can find my stuff. And as for my friend Carter Pike, his latest book, Faces of Beth, has just been released and it's getting great reviews. Yeah. It has an introduction by Brian Key. A lot of people are saying it's his best book yet, so you guys should definitely check it out. You can send Carver messages, I believe, on his Facebook. All of his stuff is available on Amazon as well. And did I miss anything?
I think that's it. I'll just remind people, if you can, subscribe to the YouTube channel or the podcast streams on iTunes and Spotify. That really helps us out. Your comments are always appreciated. Join the Written and Read podcast discussion Facebook group if you'd like to have the privilege of asking questions like some of the ones you heard us ask Ron today. Those are all from people in the group. Whoever wants to ask is free to ask. And until next time, keep it 100% horror!